In the previous lecture, we started our example of Plastem Corporation, and we said that Plastem Corporation manufactures two products, the S3 and the CL5. Of course, the S3 is the simple lens, and the CL5 is the complex lens. And of course, we went through with the manufacturing process and the distribution process and the designing process of these two, and we found out that this organization or corporation faces a problem of a lower price by a competitor. Of course, the S3 is sold to Giovanni by the amount or according to the price of $63, while as Bandix, which is the competitor, is going to sell the same simple lens by the amount of 53. Of course, the CL5, they do not have, or they do not face the same problem according to the CL5. They would price the CL5 by the amount of 137. Therefore, as we can see, the problem faced by this organization is only concerned the simple lens or the S3 lens. Of course, now let us take the shoes of the manager, or be in the shoes of the manager of Plastem Corporation. We said now we have two alternatives: either to lower our price to 53, for instance, in order to have a competitive advantage, of course, by first of all reducing our costs. If we need to know if we have the ability to reduce our costs in order to reduce our price. Or the other alternative is to pass this business with Giovanni Motors for the simple lenses. Of course, they gave us the simple costing system, and according to the case, they told us that Plastem Corporation uses a simple costing system, which is, according to this diagram, traces two direct costs, the direct materials, the direct manufacturing labor, onto the CL5 and the S3, and it allocates all indirect costs using only one allocation base, which is the direct manufacturing labor, onto the CL5 and the S3. Now, you as a manager in Plastem Corporation, what would you do? And put yourself in the shoes of the manager. What would you do? If you can remember, in Cost Accounting 1, we said in order to make a decision, we have these different phases that we need to go through, correct? Or different steps that we need to go through. What are these different steps? In order to make a decision, first of all, we need, excellent, we need to identify the problem and any uncertainties. So, what is the problem? It is not just to know the steps, we need to implement these steps. Therefore, as you said, we need to identify the problem and any uncertainties. So, what is the problem in this case, and what are the uncertainties that we are talking about in this case, of course? What do you think? What is the problem in this case?
Our product price is more than our competitor's price, and that's the problem for us. because the citizens or the people will go and buy from our
from the competition. Excellent. Excellent. Therefore, the problem that we have is that we do not have a competitive price for the simple lenses. This is the problem that we are facing right now. We are facing the problem that a competitor has a lower price than the price that we are asking for the simple lenses. Therefore, we need to, or the problem here exactly is that we need to retain Giovanni Motors. This is the problem. This is the, let us say, the main goal is that we need to retain this customer. Because if I'm going to say to all customers, go to the competitors, go to the other competitors within the market, that means we are not going to sell any of the S3. We are not going to sell any of our products. That means that our profits would decrease and we would have financial problems and so on. Therefore, the problem here is we need to retain Giovanni Motors. What is the uncertainties here in this situation? We do not know exactly why we have a higher price than the price of the competition. This is the uncertainty.
But we have more cost.
According to our allocation, according to our broad averaging method of cost allocation. Yes, we have more costs. Yes, we have, let us say, higher costs, therefore a higher price, but this is according to the costing system. Therefore, the problem or the uncertainty may be within the costing system itself. Maybe we have or we are experiencing some problems in the allocation of the indirect cost, for instance. Therefore, this is the uncertainty number one. We need to make sure that we do not have any problems within our costing system. Because maybe our costing system is overcosting the S3, therefore overpricing, therefore we have a higher price than the competition. This is a maybe. This is one of the situations that could be in play. The other thing is that we do not have a competitive advantage. The other uncertainty may be Bandix have more technological advances. Maybe Bandix have more efficiency in their production of the S3 lenses. Maybe because Bandix is only producing the S3, maybe he has this higher technology, or maybe he has this higher productivity, or maybe he has this higher efficiency, and so on. Therefore, these are the two uncertainties that we need to investigate. We need, of course, the problem is that we need to retain Giovanni. We have a problem of having a higher price than Bandix. But we do not know why this problem is in place. This is the uncertainty we are talking about. Therefore, the two uncertainties may be we have a higher price because Bandix is more efficient, because Bandix is more productive, because Bandix might have a more developed technology, for instance. On the other hand, maybe the problem is within our organization. Maybe the problem exists because of this simple costing system, correct? Therefore, after identifying the problem, identifying the uncertainties, what is the next step? The identification of the direct cost. This is according or to the 7 steps that we took in order to calculate the cost objects or the cost of any cost object. This is correct, but not in this situation. Now we are talking about the 5 steps that we need to go through in order to make a decision. Therefore, number 1, we identified the problem, we identified the uncertainties. Number two, design the possible alternative. The decision-making process is according to having more than one alternative. That means we do have more than one alternative, and we need to choose among these alternatives. And if one alternative is not, let us say, is not developed enough, we need to develop it, but according to the information that we need to obtain for these two things. Therefore, number two, obtain information. We need to obtain information. Therefore, how can we obtain information? Of course, we cannot make a decision, as we said in Cost Accounting 1, as you took in accounting principles, and of course maybe in the management principles or the introduction to management, that we cannot make a decision, we cannot choose among our alternatives, we cannot design an alternative unless we have information. Therefore, as we said, we had a problem, we had uncertainties, now we need to obtain information. How are we going to obtain this information?
Collect information about the design of the product or the manufacture and the distribution operation to know if the problem in the cost or not.
Excellent. We said that we have two uncertainties. We need to change this uncertainty to certainty by obtaining information. One of the uncertainties, we said that we might have a lower technology, we might have a lower efficiency than our competition. Therefore, we need to obtain information about this uncertainty and see, is this correct? Is this really what is happening, that we have a lower technology or lower productivity or lower efficiency or not? Therefore, the organization here, Plastem Corporation, needs to create a team from engineers, design engineers, let us say manufacturing or industrial engineers, engineers that are aware of the manufacturing process within the organization itself. And they need to obtain, or they need to come up with a report to present to the management whether we have a lower technology and lower efficiency, or this is not the case. Of course, Plastem Corporation did just that. They organized a team from design engineers, manufacturing engineers, and let us say some of the managers that are well aware of the manufacturing processes within the organization, and they found out that the technology, the capabilities, the efficiency, the productivity within the organization, within Plastem Corporation, is the same as the technology that is in the market. Therefore, after obtaining the information or this information, one of the uncertainties would be stricken out. That means we do not have lower capabilities. That means we do not have lower efficiencies. That means that the uncertainty number 2 might be in play. That means that maybe the problem is within our simple costing system that uses a broad averaging cost allocation method. Maybe this is the problem. All right? Any questions? Of course, after obtaining the information here, they found out a puzzling piece of information. According to the information that was gathered by this team of engineers, they found out, of course, according to the report, according to the information, they said that the manufacture of the simple lens is efficient, has high productivity, because Plastem Corporation is not manufacturing this lens, or it has been manufacturing this lens for quite a time. Therefore, they have the productivity, they have the efficiency, they have the experience of producing this sort of lens, which is the simple lens. Therefore, it would be puzzling to find out that the profit margin of the simple lens, which we have a lot of experience in producing, would have a lower profit margin than the CL5, which is the complex lens, which is a newly introduced product in the Plastem Corporation. That was the puzzling information, that was the puzzling piece of information that was revealed by the report of the design engineers and the manufacturing engineers. Of course, this piece of information would make us more and more sure that the problem here is because of our costing system. Because we might have an over-costing to the simple lens, which would make it, of course, as we said earlier, less profitable, while as, of course, if we have here over-costing, that means we would have here under-costing. That means that this would seem more profitable. Therefore, maybe this is the problem that we are facing and not the other uncertainty that we have been talking about. Therefore, we need now to concentrate our efforts in analyzing and refining our costing system. Of course, this information does not conclude anything. It just will put us on the right track. That means I cannot be certain 100% that the problem is within our costing system. We cannot be sure from only this piece of information. But this gives us a hint that we may have a problem in the overcosting and undercosting of our products. Therefore, number 3, we need to make predictions. Of course, predictions about the future. What are the sort of predictions that we need to make here? Of course, after obtaining the information, we said that we might have a problem in our costing system. That means if we are going to choose among the alternatives whether to decrease our cost or to decrease our price in order to have a competitive advantage within the market, that means we need to lower our costs. That means we need to calculate our costs or predicted costs or future costs for 2011, for instance, for the S3 and see whether we can reduce our price to this $53 or we cannot. All right? Therefore, the prediction, first of all, we need to calculate the costs of the S3 lens according to a new system, according to a refined system that would not overcost the S3 and would not undercost the CL5. Any questions? And of course, another prediction, of course, we need to predict what Bendix might do. If we decreased our price, what Bendix might do? What is the situation would be like if we decrease our price within the market we are competing in. Of course, number 4, we would make a decision. How we would make a decision? Excellent. We make decisions by choosing among the alternatives. We are going to choose one of the alternatives that we have presented before. We either would reduce our price in order to retain Giovanni, or we would not retain Giovanni Motors as our customer. Of course, number 5, we need to implement the decision that we have made. We need to implement the alternative that we have chosen, and of course we need to evaluate. And of course, after evaluation, we need to learn, because after the evaluation, we would maybe face problems, we would face any other uncertainties and so on. Therefore, we need to learn after the process of evaluation. Of course, these 3 steps would be according to what we are going to find out after refining our costing system. Because as we said here in number 2, we found out that the first uncertainty is not applicable to us. We have the technology, we have the capability, we have the productivity, we have the efficiency that is within the market that we are competing in. Therefore, this leaves us with the other uncertainty. Maybe we have a costing system that undercosts and overcosts our products. Any questions? Now, if the case is, or the problem lies within the costing system, we need to refine this costing system. What is the steps that we can make in order to refine any costing system? What do you think we should do to the Plastim Corporation costing system in order to make it more accurate? What do you think? We said that in lecture number 1 that inaccuracies comes from what exactly? From the allocation of indirect costs. Therefore, in order to refine the, let us say, any costing system, we need to focus upon the allocation of indirect costs. Of course, that would be after making sure that the direct costs that has been chosen as direct in the previous costing system is actually direct. Therefore, if we are sure 100% that direct costs are exactly direct as we say they are, therefore the problem will lie only in the allocation of the indirect costs. Therefore, we need to make the costing system of Plastim Corporation more accurate. How can we achieve this? By doing what exactly? If the problem lies within the allocation of indirect costs, if we need to refine this costing system, that means we need to refine the way or the method we are allocating these indirect costs. Number 1, or step number 1 that we could make is try to trace more direct costs. That means we need to analyze our indirect costs and see if by one way or another we can trace some of this indirect cost directly to a specific cost object. That means we are decreasing, of course, if we are tracing more and more direct costs, that would mean that we are decreasing the amount or percentage or materiality of the direct costs, correct? That means if we even have any inaccuracy in the allocation process, it would be a smaller and have a less impact on our decision-making process. Therefore, tracing more and more direct costs would decrease the percentage of indirect costs, which is the materiality of indirect costs. Decreasing the materiality, that means, of course, as we just said, that any inaccuracies in our allocation would not have that big effect that would have been in place if we had the same amount of the indirect cost. Therefore, step number 1, we need to analyze indirect costs and try to trace more and more direct costs. That means we need to reclassify the indirect costs. Of course, according to the definition, it should be in a cost-effective way. This should be always in our minds, that we need to trace, yes, more and more direct costs, but only if it is in a cost-effective way. Any questions? Step number 2 that we can make, the number, excellent. As we talk in Cost Accounting 1, we said that we need to make or determine homogeneous cost pools or indirect cost pools. That means that the cost pools or all the costs within one cost pool should only have one cost driver, therefore should only have one cost allocation base, correct? This is a homogeneous cost pool. But if we have the problem as the problem we just saw in Plastem Corporation, all indirect costs were allocated using only one indirect cost or indirect cost allocation base or one cost driver. Of course, this gives us a broad averaging effect, a broad averaging method that would be inaccurate. But for instance, if we increase the number of cost pools according to different number of cost drivers, we are determining, or we are, let us say, constructing more and more accurate methods or more and more accurate costing systems that would allocate exactly the costs according to the cost drivers or the best cost drivers for these cost pools. And of course, this point we discussed it in details in Cost Accounting 1. Do you remember our discussion in Cost Accounting 1 about having indirect cost pools that are homogeneous? And we said that all costs within the cost pool needs to have only one cost driver. Because if we have more than one cost that would have more than one cost driver, but we are using only one, this would be inaccurate, correct? Therefore, we need to differentiate, we need to separate this one cost pool into different cost pools that have these different allocation bases or different cost drivers. This would be the number 2, or the step number 2 that we could refine our costing system by doing. Of course, number 3, cost allocation bases. In Cost Accounting 1 also, we said in chapter number 3 exactly, we said that we need to choose a cost driver or an allocation base that has this cost, let us say, that would have a cause and effect relationship with the cost itself or with the cost pool. That means any change in the cost driver would affect a change in the cost itself. That means we have a physical relationship, we have an economic plausibility between these two. There should be a relation, a quiet, strong relation between these two, between the cost and the cost driver, which is something we called in cost accounting 1 the cause effect relationship. Therefore, in this case, in order to refine our costing system after tracing more and more direct costs, after analyzing the indirect costs into, or separating the indirect cost into more and more cost pools with more and more allocation bases, we also can analyze the cost drivers we have been using, because the cost driver needs to have a cause and effect relationship with the cost. Any questions? Now, let us go back to the costing system within Plastem Corporation and see what we could do in order to refine the costing system of Plastem Corporation. Of course, one of, let us say, the methods that could be used in order to refine any costing system is the ABC, or the activity-based costing. This, of course, is the main subject of this chapter, which is the activity-based costing. Of course, as we just said, that activity-based costing is a method or is a way that could be used in order to refine any costing system. But before seeing, or before, let us say, having to see how we are going to implement the activity-based costing, let us first of all understand what do we mean by an activity and what is the main processes of the activity or main classifications of any activity-based costing. First of all, we need to start our discussion of the activity-based costing by defining what do we mean by an activity. So what do you think an activity means? Within an organization, of course. What is an activity?
Events or task or unit of work for a specific purpose.
Excellent. Any business function, any business process, any business task that has a specific purpose is an activity. Therefore, in the activity-based costing, we would first analyze our costing system not according to different cost pools that as the simple costing system, or as we took in cost accounting 1, but according to different activities. Therefore, first of all, or the first step in any activity-based costing is the analysis of the business functions, is the analysis of the manufacturing process, is the analysis of the production process or the business process as a total into different activities. And we just said that an activity is anything, any task, any process that has a specific purpose. Who can give us an example of an activity? So what do you think? An activity. Maintenance, is it an activity? What do you think? Maintenance, is it an activity?
Yes.
Maintenance is an activity.
Designing new product.
Excellent. Designing. Manufacturing, or let us say manufacturing is a broad word. So, for instance, the operation of the machines. Excellent. It is an activity. Marketing is an activity. Of course, marketing also is a broad word. The setting up of the machines, cleaning the machines. For instance, the purchasing of the raw materials, and so on. We would have a lot of activities within an organization, or within, of course, not only a manufacturing organization or any organization. Therefore, first step in the activity-based costing, we would analyze our processes, our business functions into these different activities. Of course, our analysis to these activities, in order to have, which is, as we said, number 2 here, in order to refine a costing system, in order to have more than 1 or 2 cost pools. Because as we have a larger number of cost pools, that means we have a more accurate way in order to allocate these costs onto the different cost objects. Therefore, step number 1, defining, or let us say determining the activities within the organization. After determining the activities, of course, we need to choose or determine the cost drivers for these activities. Because in the sense, or let us say in the sense that we are going to allocate the costs, and we are talking here about a costing system which is the main purpose, or has a main purpose of determining or calculating the costs of any cost object, products, services, and so on. Therefore, our goal in the costing system is to calculate costs for any cost object. In order to calculate these costs, as we said in an activity-based costing, we need first of all to determine the activities. After determining the activities, we need to determine the cost allocation basis. Of course, the process here of determining the activities and determining the cost allocation basis is quite simultaneous. That means we are determining the activities and grouping these activities maybe into one activity according to the cost allocation basis. Of course, we might have, for instance, activity 1, for instance, which is the repair of the machines. We might have activity number 2, which is the operation of the machines. For instance, activity number 3. It would be the operation control, for instance. This is the step number 1 we are talking about. We need to determine all the activities. Of course, these are only some of the activities that might be in a manufacturing organization. But after going on to the next step, which is the determination of cost allocation basis, we found out that these all activities would have only one cost allocation base, only one cost driver. In this case, which is, for instance, machine hours. In this case, activity 1, activity 2, activity 3 would be all, let us say, added onto only one activity, which is activity 1. For instance, let us call it the operation of machines, or the machinery operation, or something like this. This is what we mean, that this or these two steps can happen in the same time. We first need to determine all the activities, but of course we need we need to group all activities with one cost allocation base in one cost pool. Correct? That means if we have more than one activity, 5 activities, 10 activities with only one cost allocation base, or with one cost driver, it would be grouped up into only one activity. Correct? Therefore, we need to determine the activities, and determine the activities, of course, according to the cost allocation basis. Therefore, these two would happen at the same time. After, of course, knowing the activities, after knowing the cost allocation basis for these activities or these different activities, we need to determine what? The costs of these activities. As we can see here, this is the same procedure that we use, or that we used in Cost Accounting 1. If you can remember, in Cost Accounting 1, we said in order to calculate the cost of any cost object, we need to go through 7 steps, correct? From these 7 steps, of course, step number 1, determining the cost object. Step number 2, determining the direct costs that can be traced in a cost-effective way to this cost object. Step number 3, the indirect costs itself. Or first of all, we need to determine the allocation basis by which we are going to allocate the indirect costs. This is step number 3. Step number 4, determining the cost pools according to the cost allocation basis. This is the same thing. But instead of determining the allocation basis according to different cost pools that are vague and averaged, we are here making this process more accurate, making this process more detailed. This is the only thing we are doing. That means here we are going, in step number 3, we are going to choose the cost allocation basis according to the different activities, which is step number 4. And we said in Cost Accounting 1 that step number 3 and step number 4 also can be done at the same time. Here we are saying the same thing. We are saying that the activities should be determined as well as the cost allocation basis simultaneously at the same time. Of course, after determining the activities and the cost allocation basis, we are going to determine the cost of these activities. So if we have this information, the cost of the allocation basis, and of course we have this information, the cost of these activities, what we can do with this information? Calculate the indirect costs. We have already determined the indirect costs here. The costs of the activities are indirect costs because we said the reform here would concentrate on the refining of the allocation of indirect costs. Therefore, the costs of these activities are actually the indirect costs we are, or we want, or as you said, we want to determine. Therefore, we have determined the costs. So, after this, we need to calculate the budgeted allocation rate by dividing the cost activity or the activity cost pool by the number of units, total units of course, of the allocation base for the same activity. Correct? This is the same procedure, the same process that is within a simple costing system. Therefore, after determining the budgeted allocation rate, we would allocate the cost of these different activities onto the different cost objects that we have. For instance, in the Plastem Corporation, we would allocate these costs onto, for instance, the S3 and the CL5. Any questions? Now let us go back to the Plastem Corporation. As we can see here, that Plastem Corporation, and according to their analysis, to their manufacturing process, they found out that they have 7 different activities with 7 different allocation bases. That means 7 different cost drivers. Of course, they would have much more than these activities, but as we said, we need to group all the activities that have the same cost driver. For instance, you have in C here, operate molding machines to manufacture lenses. This activity actually consists of more than one activity. It consists of the activity of the operation of these machines. It consists of the maintenance of these machines. It consists of the depreciation of these machines, and so on. Therefore, these activities are not only the activities that are within this organization, but these are the 7 different activities that have the same cost driver, or have, of course, different cost drivers between each activity and the other. As we can see here, the first activity is designing the products and processes. Activity 2 is setting up molding machines. Activity 3, operating molding machines. Activity D, cleaning and maintaining the molds after lenses are manufactured. Activity E, prepare batches of finished lenses for shipment. F, distribute lenses to customers, and G, administer and manage all processes at Plastem. These are the different activities according to the analysis that they have done to their manufacturing process or to their organization. Now, of course, if we did determine the activities here, and of course the allocation basis, we need now to refine or go through the steps of refining the costing system. We said in number one, in refining the costing system, we need to trace more and more direct costs. Therefore, we need to ask ourselves this following question. Can any activity of these activities be traced in a cost-effective way? Because if this is the case, if we have one of these activities that could be traced in a cost-effective way, that means we are decreasing the indirect cost and increasing the direct cost. We are decreasing the possible inaccuracies in our costing system and increasing our accuracies in the costing system. Of course, after the analysis, they found out that D, activity D, which is cleaning and maintaining the molds after lenses are manufactured, could be traced directly to a specific cost object. Because as they say, according to their experience with their manufacturing process, they found out that cleaning and maintaining the molds, they have two different molds. They have the mold for the simple lens, and they have another mold for the CL5 or the complex lens. Therefore, cleaning this mold is separate than cleaning, or has separate activities and separate, let us say, employees that work on the other cleaning of and maintaining of the other lens. Therefore, in this case, we could trace directly this activity or the cost of this activity to the cost object S3 and the CL5. Therefore, this is the step number one in any procedure to refine the costing system, which is trying to trace more and more direct costs in order to decrease our indirect costs. By this, we have finished our lecture today. Inshallah, we are going to continue the next time. Thank you for listening.